Do you need me to renew that $1 million contract? My Uncle Robert's question cut through the air in the dining room like a sharp knife during Easter lunch at my parents' house. The fork slipped from my hand and hit the plate with a metallic clang that echoed through the quiet family room. All eyes turned to me. Mom stopped chewing her roast turkey, Dad almost choked on his red wine, and my older brother Dylan stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What contract? The words came out of my mouth as a hoarse whisper. Uncle Robert frowned, his confused expression quickly turning into something much more serious. The consulting contract I renew every year. $1 million divided into 12 installments to cover all your college expenses and give you a comfortable life while you graduate. My name is Josh, I'm 21 years old, and at that moment I felt my world collapse as I looked at the faces of my family. Because I had never, not once, received a penny of that money. My mind flashed back to the last 3 years at Colorado State University. The early mornings waking up at 4:30 a.m. to work at the lumberyard from 5 to 9. Rushing to class and then straight to my second job waiting tables at an Italian restaurant until after midnight. The weeks when the money didn't come and I split a package of instant noodles into 3 meals. The times I passed out from hunger during organic chemistry class. The silence at the table stretched like a string about to snap. Josh hasn't received a penny, Uncle Robert said in a dangerous tone I knew well. It was the same tone he used when he found out someone was trying to cheat him in business. Where's the money, Michael? My father turned pale. Mom began to nervously play with her necklace, avoiding looking me directly in the eye or facing Uncle Robert. Dad, it's complicated, my father stammered, the words tripping over each other. Maybe we should discuss this in private. Nothing private, my uncle said, slamming his fist on the table and making the plates rattle. I want to know right now where my nephew's money is. That's when Dylan spoke, his voice low and tense. They used the money to pay off my poker debts. The world stopped. I lost my breath as my brother's words echoed around the room. Poker debts. While I was starving, working 17 hours a day and carrying bags of cement that weighed more than I did, they were using my uncle's money to fund the vices of the family's golden boy. Uncle Robert rose slowly, his chair scraping across the floor with a sound that made me shudder. At 58, he was still an imposing presence when he was angry. $360,000, he said, each word cutting like crystal. $360,000 in 3 years. Money that was supposed to help Josh graduate debt-free, so he could focus on his studies instead of killing himself working. Mom finally found her voice, though it trembled. Robert, Dylan had serious problems. There were dangerous people threatening him. We had no choice. No choice. Uncle's voice rose an octave. The choice was to tell me the truth and ask me for help instead of lying to me while Josh suffered. If you're enjoying this story of family betrayal and want to find out how this explosive situation unfolds, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will leave you speechless. Because at that moment, looking at the guilty faces of my family, a question began to form in my mind. If they lied about this, what else have they lied to me about? The explosion that followed Dylan's confession was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Mom stood up so abruptly that she knocked over her glass of red wine, creating a red stain that spread across the white tablecloth like blood. Dylan, why did you say that? She screamed, her voice broken with despair. Because I can't keep lying, Dylan replied, running his hands through his dark hair. Look at him, Mom. Look what we've done to our own brother. And that's exactly what everyone did. They looked at me. I sat there, 21 years old and weighing 128 pounds when I should have weighed at least 150. My blue plaid shirt, which had been Dylan's, hung on me like a scarecrow. The deep circles under my eyes told the story of months of sleeping 3 hours a night. Uncle Robert came over to me and touched my shoulder with a gentleness that almost made me break down. Tell me everything, kid. From the beginning. So I told him. I told him about getting up at 4:30 in the morning to get to the warehouse by 5. Carrying 50-pound bags of cement for 4 hours before rushing to my first class at 9. Working at the restaurant until 1 in the morning and arriving at the dorm too exhausted to study properly. Do you remember last week when you called asking if I was eating well? I asked Mom, my voice getting louder and louder. I said yes because I was ashamed to admit that for the past 2 days I had been eating only cereal bars I found in my closet. My dad tried to intervene. Josh, son, if you had told us you were struggling. I did. The explosion came out of me with a force that surprised me. I called you guys last October, crying, begging for help because I couldn't pay my dorm rent. You know what you told me, Dad? Real men find a way. Get another job. The silence in the room was deafening. And you, Mom, I continued, turning to her, when I called in December because my sneakers were worn out and I was walking through the snow in wet socks every day, you told me I was being dramatic and that I should learn to manage my money better. Uncle Robert slammed his fist on the table again, making the plates jump. Meanwhile, you were getting $1,500 a month of MY money. Money that was specifically for him. Dylan finally found the courage to speak again. It wasn't just the monthly allowance, Uncle Robert. Remember the $8,000 you sent for his first semester tuition? My blood ran cold. What $8,000? Josh never had any problems with tuition, Mom said quickly. He has a scholarship. A partial scholarship, Dylan corrected, looking at me with guilt-ridden eyes. His scholarship covers 60%. You sent $8,000 to cover the rest for his first semester, plus $8,000 for his second, plus $8,000 for his third. Uncle Robert rose slowly, his expression shifting from anger to something far more dangerous, utter disappointment. $24,000 in tuition plus $36,000 in monthly payments, he calculated aloud. $60,000, Robert. In 2 years. The math hit me like a punch in the stomach. $60,000 while I was literally starving, working myself sick, and sleeping on the floor of my room because I couldn't afford the deposit to rent a bed. Josh, Dylan's voice trembled. Remember that time you passed out during organic chemistry in freshman year? When you said you had the flu. I remembered it perfectly. I hadn't eaten anything in 2 days because I spent my last money on the textbook the professor said was required. We were in Las Vegas, Dylan whispered. Celebrating that I got lucky at blackjack. We spent $2,000 of his money on that trip. Each revelation was like being hit with a hammer. I got up from the chair with my legs shaking and walked to the dining room window. Outside, the quiet suburban neighborhood looked normal, peaceful. Children played in the street, ordinary families with ordinary problems. There's more, Dylan said behind me. I closed my eyes tightly. Dylan, that's enough, Dad tried to silence him. No, Dad. He deserves to know everything. Dylan took a deep breath. Josh, remember when you called on Christmas asking if you could come home and we said we were traveling? I turned to look at him. I remembered it perfectly. I spent Christmas alone in my empty dorm room, eating instant noodles and watching reruns of old movies. We didn't go anywhere. We were here. But I lost a really big bet, and some dangerous people were threatening me. They came to the house. Dad and Mom thought it would be dangerous for you to be here. So they left me alone at Christmas to protect the son who caused the problem, he said in a strangely calm voice. Interesting choice. Uncle Robert approached my parents, standing tall despite his 58 years. Robert, Elizabeth, you have 5 minutes to explain to me exactly where every penny of that money went. And if I find out you've lied about anything, you won't see another penny from me. Dad looked at Mom, who nodded with tears in her eyes. The first bet started in Dylan's senior year of high school, Dad began, his voice faltering. Small things, online sports betting. By the time he got to college, he was gambling on poker online. In his first semester, he lost $4,000 from the savings account we opened for him, Mom continued. We didn't tell you, Robert, because we thought it was just a phase. But it wasn't a phase. Dylan stood up and began pacing. It got worse. I started gambling in casinos, then illegal games. By my sophomore year, I owed $20,000 to some very dangerous people. That's when you used Josh's money for the first time, Uncle Robert said without waiting for an answer. We were going to pay it back, Dad said desperately. We thought Dylan would learn his lesson after a scare, that he'd stop. But he kept gambling, and you kept using my money to pay his debts, I said, turning back to the window. For 2 years. While I worked 17 hours a day. The irony was too bitter. Dylan, the perfect son who never had to work a day in his life, was destroying his life with gambling while I, the forgotten son, was killing myself working to survive. And our parents decided to save the addict by letting the hard-working son go without. Josh, Mom said, her voice breaking, we never wanted you to know. We thought we could work this out without involving you. Without involving me? I turned to her, feeling a cold anger spreading through my chest. Mom, I was involved from the first day I went hungry to pay for my education. I was involved every time I worked sick because I couldn't afford to miss a day's pay. I was involved every time I cried alone in my room because I didn't understand why you wouldn't help me. But as the words left my mouth, a much more disturbing question began to form in my mind. If they lied about $60,000 for 2 years, what other lies were they hiding? Uncle Robert picked up his phone and started dialing. I'm calling my accountant. I want to see every transfer I've made to this family in the last 5 years. Robert, no, Mom begged, reaching for the phone. Please, we can work this out between us. Too late, Elizabeth. He pushed her arm away. Hello, Peterson? I need you to email me a complete report of all transfers to Michael Richardson for the last 5 years. Yes, all of them. Even the smallest ones. As his uncle spoke, Dylan approached me. Josh, I know you're angry, but you need to understand. Understand what? I turned to him, the anger finally escaping my control. That you watched me work myself to exhaustion and chose to remain silent? That you let me believe that our family simply didn't care about me? It wasn't that simple, Dylan tried to explain. The people I owed money to don't mess around. They threatened to break my legs. Then they said they'd go after the family. So you sacrificed me to protect everyone else, I replied with icy clarity. Interesting how I've always been the last priority. Uncle Robert's phone beeped. He glanced at the screen and his expression grew even darker. I just got the preliminary report, he said, scrolling through the email. Michael, in 5 years, you've received $420,000 from me. The room fell completely silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. 420,000? I whispered, doing the math in my head. That's, on top of the 360,000 that was specifically for me? Uncle Robert continued reading, 20,000 for Dylan's medical emergency in December 2020. 15,000 for urgent home repairs in March 2021. 12,000 for car problems in June. Each item was like a stab in the heart. A clear pattern emerged. Whenever Dylan needed money to pay debts or cover losses, a family emergency would arise that justified asking Uncle Robert for help. The medical emergency, I said, remembering suddenly. Dylan, you said you broke your leg skiing and needed surgery. Dylan hung his head. I never broke my leg. I lost 20,000 on a bad night at poker, and the guys were looking for me. Dad made up the surgery story. And the house repairs? Uncle Robert asked, his voice growing dangerous. There were no repairs, Dad admitted, finally speaking. Dylan had lost another 15,000, and we had to pay before the threats turned physical. I stood up and walked over to the bookcase, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. These weren't just isolated lies. It was a complete system of fraud that had been going on for years. A family operation to finance the destruction of one son while the other wasted away. Josh, Mom's voice was almost a whisper. You have to understand our position. Dylan is our son too. We couldn't let him get hurt. I turned slowly to her. I'm your son too, Mom. And you let me get hurt every day for 3 years. That's different, she tried to justify. You're strong, independent. Dylan has always been more fragile, more sensitive. More sensitive. The irony made me laugh bitterly. Dylan has been gambling away money that isn't his for years while I've been working since I was 18 just to survive. Which one of us is really fragile? Uncle Robert's phone rang. It was his wife, Aunt Linda. He answered on speakerphone. Honey, I just got off the phone with your sister Carol. She's furious. She said she's going to call Josh personally to apologize for the whole family. Uncle Robert looked at my parents. Carol knows everything. I told her this morning. And I'm going to tell every member of this family exactly what you did. Dad turned pale. Robert, this will destroy our reputation. People will think the truth, Uncle Robert cut him off. That you stole from a college student to fund your gambling. That was the moment something changed inside me. For 3 years, I had accepted every humiliation, every refusal to help, every excuse that they couldn't support me financially. I had internalized the idea that maybe I didn't deserve help, that maybe I was weak for needing it. Now I knew the truth. It wasn't that they didn't have the money. It was that they had consciously chosen to give my money to someone else. I want to see everything, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Every transfer, every excuse, every lie you told Uncle Robert. Josh, this isn't going to help anyone, Mom tried to dissuade me. It will help me, I replied, looking her straight in the eye. It will help me understand exactly what kind of family I've been dealing with all these years. Uncle Robert smiled for the first time since he arrived. Peterson just sent me the full report. Josh, do you want to come with me? We'll go over everything together. I nodded. For the first time in years, someone was treating me as if I deserved to know the truth about my own life. Where are you going? Dad asked, panic clear in his voice. To sort this out properly, Uncle Robert replied, putting his phone away. Josh, do you have anything you need to grab? I looked around the room where I grew up. The family photos on the walls, the piano where Mom tried to teach me to play when I was 8, the fireplace where we spent countless Christmas evenings. Everything looked different now, tainted by the knowledge of systematic betrayal. There's nothing here I need, I said, walking toward the door. But as I followed Uncle Robert out of the house, a question burned in my mind. If they had built such an elaborate system of lies to protect Dylan, what other things about my life had been manipulated without my knowledge? In Uncle Robert's private office, an elegant room with a view of the Colorado mountains, we sat in front of 3 monitors displaying spreadsheets that told the complete story of my family's betrayal. Peterson's financial report was devastating in its clinical precision. $420,000, Uncle Robert said, pointing to the total on the screen. That's in addition to the $360,000 that was specifically his. 75 separate transfers over 5 years. Each line on the spreadsheet represented an elaborate lie. Dylan's emergency surgery, $20,000 in December 2020. Urgent roof repairs after storm, $15,000 in March 2021. Specialized medical equipment for Dad's heart condition, $18,000 in September of that year. Your father never had a heart condition, Uncle Robert muttered, highlighting that entry. And Dylan never had any surgery. I began to understand the sophistication of the scheme. These weren't improvised lies. It was a coordinated operation to systematically extract money using fabricated emergencies that appealed to Uncle Robert's natural compassion. They studied you, I said, the realization hitting me like a cold wave. They knew exactly what kind of request you would never refuse. Medical emergencies, structural problems with the house, safety issues, he confirmed, nodding. 50 years of building a reputation as a man who always helps his family, and they used that against me. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out each transfer, creating a timeline that revealed the pattern. Whenever Dylan had a big loss at gambling, a family crisis appeared within a week. The correlation was so obvious it was insulting. Now here's the interesting part, Uncle Robert said, opening a new folder on his computer. Peterson didn't just track the money I sent. He investigated where it went. The new spreadsheet showed my family's bank accounts. Deposits from Uncle Robert coming in, and within days, transfers going out to online casinos, sportsbooks, and something called High Stakes Entertainment LLC. Dylan wasn't just gambling, Uncle Robert analyzed. He was financing a lifestyle based on high-stakes gambling. Trips to Las Vegas, Atlantic City, even a few to Monte Carlo. I felt a cold anger solidifying in my stomach. While I was dividing packages of instant noodles into 3 meals, Dylan was dining at luxury casinos with my money. What's the plan? I asked, my voice firmer than I expected. Uncle Robert smiled for the first time that day. First, we're going to cut off all of her sources of income. Not just future transfers. I'm canceling all the corporate credit cards I provided, closing shared accounts, everything. He opened another file. Second, I'm transferring all the property they were expecting to inherit to a foundation in his name. That includes the house they grew up in, 2 rental properties, and a savings account with $100,000. My head was spinning trying to process the magnitude of what he was proposing. Third, he continued, I'm going to hire a private investigator to document exactly how Dylan spent every dollar. If there was organized crime involved, if he owes money to dangerous people, I want to know everything. What about my parents? I asked. Oh, your parents, Uncle Robert laughed bitterly. I found out something interesting about your father's company. He hasn't had a contract in 2 years. The company exists only on paper. They've been living off my money all this time. The revelation hit me like a bolt of lightning. Dad always talked about his big projects, his important clients, his future opportunities. It was all a lie. But the most interesting part, Uncle Robert said, picking up his phone, is that your mother sent me a message this morning. He showed me the screen. Mom had written, "Robert, Josh is being dramatic about this whole situation. You know how sensitive he is. Dylan really needs our help right now. He's making a lot of progress in therapy. Maybe we can talk about reducing Josh's allowance to $1,000 a month, just until Dylan stabilizes. Josh doesn't even need that much money. He's young and strong, he can work." I read the message twice, disbelief giving way to fury. They still want to cut my money to give to Dylan? I asked, my voice shaking with rage. Not anymore, Uncle Robert said firmly. Not a penny more. We spent the next hour creating a detailed schedule. Monday, he would cut off all financial support. Tuesday, he would begin the property transfers. Wednesday, the private investigator would start work. Thursday, he would tell the entire extended family exactly what my parents had done. "And you, Josh," he said, looking me straight in the eye, "you quit your job immediately. I'm going to transfer $200,000 into an account I'm opening specifically for you. This isn't charity, it's restitution. It's what you should have received from the beginning, with interest for the 3 years of suffering." "Uncle Robert, I can't accept that much." "You can and you will," his voice left no room for discussion. "Josh, in 5 years I gave your family over $700,000 based on lies. $200,000 to you, based on the truth, is the least I can do." My phone vibrated. A message from Dylan. "Josh, please call me. I need to explain everything to you." I showed the message to Uncle Robert. He shook his head. "Don't respond yet. First, I want you to document everything. Every message, every call, every attempt they make to minimize or justify what they've done. If they try to manipulate you emotionally, I want proof." Another message arrived, this time from Mom. "Son, come home. We can talk about this as a family. You know we love you." "They're going to try to make you feel guilty," Uncle Robert predicted. "They'll say you're family, that everyone makes mistakes, that Dylan needs help. Be prepared." "I'm prepared," I replied, surprising myself with my own firmness. But the truth was that part of me still doubted. 3 years of believing that my family simply couldn't help me versus discovering that they stole nearly $1 million intended for me. The betrayal was so deep that my brain still struggled to accept its reality. "There's something you need to know," Uncle Robert said, his expression growing even more serious. "I've looked into Dylan's current debts. He owes $120,000 to private creditors. People who don't accept bankruptcy or negotiation." My blood ran cold. "They're going to ask for more money." "Exactly. And when that happens, when they come to you desperate, begging you to intercede on his behalf," he paused, "that's when your revenge will be sweetest. Because you'll finally have the power to say no." The phone rang again. This time it was Dad. "Josh, your uncle is making a mistake. We're a family. Don't let him punish us for trying to protect Dylan." If you're following this incredible story of discovery and justice, subscribe to the channel because the revenge that is being planned will surprise even you. I read the message and showed it to Uncle Robert. He smiled coldly. "Protect Dylan," he repeated. "Interesting how they rephrase finance his self-destruction at your expense." I put the phone down without answering and looked at Uncle Robert. I want them to feel exactly how they made me feel. The hopelessness of not knowing how they're going to pay the bills. The humiliation of having to beg for help and be rejected. What about Dylan? I thought about my brother for a moment. Dylan needs real help. Not money to keep gambling. But it's not my responsibility to save him while I'm drowning. "Perfect," said Uncle Robert, closing his laptop. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." When we left the office 2 hours later, I had a complete plan and the resources to execute it. More importantly, I had the blessing and support of someone who really cared about me. But as we drove back to campus, one question kept hammering away at me. If my family had orchestrated such an elaborate operation of lies, What other parts of my life had been manipulated without my knowledge? The first bomb dropped on Monday morning. Uncle Robert called Dad and asked him to meet him at the bank. "We need to review some investments," he said with deceptive casualness. Meanwhile, I was on campus for the first time in 3 years with no rush to get to work. The feeling was strange, almost unreal. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang. "It's done," Uncle Robert said simply. "I closed all the accounts, canceled all the cards." Your father turned white when I showed him the statements. 2 hours later, my phone exploded with messages. "Dad, Josh, your uncle has gone crazy. You need to talk to him. Mom, please, we're a family. Don't let him punish us like this." I ignored them all. On Tuesday, Uncle Robert executed Phase 2. He told the entire extended family exactly what my parents had done. Aunt Carol called me in tears. $10,000, Josh? How did you survive? I explained briefly. When I finished, she was furious. "I'm going to talk to your mother. This is unforgivable." The story spread like wildfire. Each call from outraged relatives was another source of support my parents lost forever. The reputation they had spent decades building was crumbling in a matter of hours. The Rayol explosion came on Friday. Dylan showed up at my dorm room, desperate. "Josh, you have to stop this. They can't pay the bills without Uncle Robert." "How were your therapy sessions this week?" I asked calmly. "Don't be sarcastic." $70 a session, twice a week. $560 a month out of the money that was supposed to feed me. Dylan ran his hands through his hair. "They're our parents. They don't deserve to be out on the street. I spent 3 years literally starving. Do you know what it's like to pass out during an exam?" "I can get money," Dylan said desperately. "I have some bets that could pay off." "Bets?" I shouted. "No, investments. Legitimate things." I called Uncle Robert on speakerphone. "Uncle Robert, Dylan is still gambling." The silence was deafening. "Dylan, get out right now and don't come near Josh until you prove you're clean." Dylan looked at me pleadingly. "We're brothers. Brothers don't let brothers go hungry while they gamble away his money." Saturday arrived, the final phase. Uncle Robert called a meeting at my parents' house to clarify the financial situation. I arrived carrying a folder with all the evidence. Mom and Dad looked like they had aged years in a week. Dylan avoided my gaze. "Well," Uncle Robert began, pulling documents out of the briefcase. "I've canceled all financial support. Today I've come to formalize additional changes." He placed a document on the table. "This house is being transferred to Josh." Mom turned pale. "Robert, you can't." "The 2 rental properties, too. And the $100,000 savings account." Dad stood up, shaking. "This is excessive." "Excessive?" exploded Uncle Robert. "They stole for 5 years. They let a boy go hungry." "And there's more," he said, opening my briefcase. "Dad, your company has been bankrupt for 2 years. You've been living off Uncle Robert's money." Absolute silence. "Not only did you spend my money on Dylan," I continued, "but you lied about having your own income." But it was when Uncle Robert's private investigator arrived that the true extent of the betrayal was revealed. "Mr. Thompson," said the investigator, entering the room, "I've finished the report on Dylan Richardson." The 50-year-old man, a serious-looking former police officer, opened his briefcase. "Dylan doesn't just have gambling debts. He's under investigation by the FBI for money laundering through online gambling." The room went cold. "What money laundering?" whispered Dad. "Your son was using money from questionable sources to place bets, then moving the winnings through different accounts to clean the funds. The money you provided allowed him to scale up the operation." Dylan collapsed into a chair. "It wasn't supposed to get this far. It was just to pay off the initial debts." "You turned our nephew into a victim to finance federal crimes," Uncle Robert said, his voice dangerously low. The investigator continued, "There are outstanding arrest warrants. Federal agents will be visiting this residence within 72 hours. Mom began to sob uncontrollably. "Josh, please forgive your parents. We didn't know the extent." "You knew enough," I interrupted, standing up. You knew he was starving while you financed his gambling. That was enough. I took the keys Uncle Robert handed me. You have 30 days to get out of this house. The money you hope to inherit will now fund my education. What about Dylan? Dad asked desperately. Dylan chose his own path a long time ago, I replied, walking toward the door. Now he'll face the consequences without dragging me down with him. But as I left, listening to Mom's sobs and Dad's desperate attempts to negotiate with Uncle Robert, one final question hit me. After discovering the truth about my family, what else about my life had been based on lies? 6 months after the meeting that changed everything, I was sitting in the new law office that Uncle Robert had hired for me, reviewing the final documents for the property transfer. Life had changed in ways I could never have imagined. The consequences for my family hit like a relentless tsunami. Dad had to file personal bankruptcy when creditors discovered that his company hadn't existed for 2 years. Mom was forced to sell her jewelry and cars to pay off basic debts. The house I grew up in, which was now legally mine, was on the market to help cover Dylan's legal costs. As for Dylan, well, he finally hit rock bottom. Without the steady stream of money from Uncle Robert to fund his gambling, he lost the apartment he was renting and had to move into a basement room at a friend's house. The federal investigation revealed debts of $180,000 to criminal organizations, far beyond what any normal family could pay. How do you feel about all this? My psychologist, Dr. Martinez, asked me during one of our weekly sessions. It was a question he had asked me constantly since I started therapy 3 months earlier. Relieved, I answered honestly. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. And it was true. With Uncle Robert's financial support, I had quit both jobs and devoted myself completely to my studies. My grade point average had risen from 2.8 to 3.9 in 1 semester. I had gained weight, muscle, and for the first time since I was 18, I looked like someone my age. And your family? Dr. Martinez pressed. They made their decisions, I said, staring out the office window. For 5 years, they chose Dylan over me. They chose lies over the truth. They chose to sacrifice me to protect his addiction. 2 weeks earlier, Mom had called me for the first time since the meeting at home. Josh, her voice trembled, your father is in the hospital. He had a heart attack due to stress. Could you help us with the medical bills? The irony was bitter. They had spent $700,000 on lies, and now they were asking for help with a real emergency. Mom, I said calmly, remember when I called asking for help because I was starving? You told me to get another job. Josh, please. The answer is no. Good luck. I hung up and blocked her number. Uncle Robert started visiting me every week, always with updates on how our extended family was reacting to the situation. Aunt Carol wants to know if you're coming to her summer barbecue, he told me over Sunday lunch. She said you're always welcome, but your parents aren't. And the rest of the family is divided. Half think you were too harsh, half think you were too soft. We laughed together. At 58, Uncle Robert had become not only my financial benefactor, but my mentor in life. Josh, he said, becoming serious, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just for how you handled this situation, but for the person you've become throughout this process. Thank you, Uncle Robert. For everything. You know what I'm most proud of? He asked, smiling. You could have used that money to get cruel revenge. You could have publicly humiliated them or destroyed their lives for the pleasure of it. But you simply withdrew the support they didn't deserve and let them face the natural consequences of their actions. He was right. I could have done much worse. I could have publicly exposed all the lies, sued them for fraud, made their lives impossible. Instead, I simply stopped being their victim. The real transformation had happened inside me. 3 years of working 17 hours a day taught me resilience. 5 years of being ignored taught me independence. Discovering my family's betrayal taught me the difference between true love and manipulation. Today, as I prepared for my senior year of college, I knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. Last week, I received a letter from Dylan, the first real communication in months. Josh, the letter read, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I wasted opportunities you never had. I want you to know that I've been in recovery for 90 days. This time it's different because I'm doing it for myself, not to please anyone else. I'm not asking for money or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did to you, and I'm sorry. I put the letter in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd write back. Maybe not. Forgiveness is something you give when you're ready, not when someone asks for it. 3 days ago, I ran into Dad at the supermarket. He was thinner, grayer, pushing a cart with store brands instead of the expensive brands he used to buy. Our eyes met for a moment. He lowered his head and walked in the opposite direction. I felt no anger or satisfaction. Just a distant sadness for what our family could have been if they had made different decisions. Dr. Martinez asked me if I regretted anything. Only one thing, I replied. I regret not finding out the truth sooner. Because the truth set me free. Not just financially, but emotionally. Today I know that I deserve to be treated with respect. I know that my family was wrong to sacrifice me for Dylan. I know that I am not responsible for saving people who don't want to be saved. And most importantly, I know that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into. Uncle Robert, Dr. Martinez, my roommate Kevin, my academic mentor Professor Williams, my new friends from the study group, these are the people who support me, respect me, and believe in my potential. Next month, I will graduate magna cum laude with a degree in mechanical engineering. I already have 3 job offers from top-tier companies. Uncle Robert offered me a position at his construction company, but I want to go my own way. Are you sure? He asked when I respectfully declined. Yes. I need to know that I earned it on my own. He smiled proudly. That's my nephew. Yesterday, 5 years after that family meeting that changed everything, I received my diploma with highest honors. In the audience were Uncle Robert, Professor Williams, Dr. Martinez, and Kevin. My parents weren't there. Neither was Dylan. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. Because I discovered something fundamental: you don't need the approval of those who hurt you to validate your success. The last I heard from Dylan, he had been clean for 3 months and was working as a mechanic. Dad got a part-time job at an accounting firm. Mom was selling cosmetics online. Me? Well, next Monday I start my first job as a junior engineer at an aerospace company, earning more in 6 months than I did in 2 years working 17 hours a day. The difference is that now every dollar I earn is the result of my own effort, my own merit. And that's priceless. If this story of overcoming adversity and justice touched your heart, subscribe to our channel because we have dozens of stories about people who refused to accept injustice and fought to get their lives back. Stories that prove that sometimes the best revenge is simply to live well. Because in the end, the real victory wasn't seeing my family pay for what they did. It was discovering that I was worth much more than they ever made me believe.